Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the third and final part of the Cheyenne restoration. And yeah, we're going to finish this guy up. If you remember in the second video, the second part, we left off where I had just finished putting on the last coat of polyurethane. And so now I'm just prepping the cabinet for the vinyl, the black vinyl that we're going to throw on here. So I've got my tack cloth again here. I think this is a different one, but just making sure I've got all the dust particles from the final light sanding all picked up, and we've got the surface all cleaned up and ready so that we can apply the vinyl. And I think all of the Exidy gun game cabinets had a black vinyl on them. I may be mistaken, but they had this it's this real heavy duty almost like a Morocco, I believe is what they call it, vinyl. So it's got a texture to it. And this stuff that I'm throwing on here, I bought from my buddy Chris. He had a whole roll of this stuff. It's not quite the same as the original vinyl, but it's close. It's got a fine texture to it, a little bit finer than the original stuff, but I like it a lot, and it's pretty darn close, and the price was right. So that's what I decided to go with. And this stuff is pretty darn thick. It's, I believe, 8 mil, which, to kind of put things in perspective, my Marble Madness Atari vinyl is a black vinyl, and that's only 3 mil. And by mil, I believe that's millions, like, or I think 3 mil. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 3/1000ths. I don't think it's, and so this would be like 8/1000ths. 1000s if I got that right. Anyways, the point is it's a bit thicker. It's quite a bit thicker than the other stuff. And the other stuff that I used on Marble Madness was so thin that just about anything, any little tiny blemish, it was like paper basically. Actually thinner than paper. This stuff is kind of like, you can almost think of it as like construction paper thickness. So I have a little bit of leeway. Still, you don't want any blemishes on the cabinet. So that's what all the prep work was about. But with that said, this vinyl is a little more forgiving. So what I'm doing here is basically just laying out a bunch of weights just to hold the vinyl down. I don't have to be like super precise here, just because I have a lot of overlap. This vinyl will cover a few inches on every side of this cabinet. So I just want to get this started. And Chris said that he uses weights, and I thought, well, hey, I've got a bunch of weights. That sounds easy enough rather than having to tape this down. And since it's not dedicated side art, don't have to be super precise with it. So that's just what I decided to do here, just to save a little bit of time. Now I'm just getting ready here, just peeling this apart. And honestly, this part of just peeling back the vinyl, for me, is kind of nerve-wracking because I have a tendency, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I have a tendency to cut the paper a little bit too close. And you'll see here, I think I do it here. I end up getting a little bit of the backing stuck to the vinyl, and that becomes kind of a tedious pain in the ass because you have to pick that stuff off of the vinyl itself. I'm just trying to find the right angle and get this thing all cut back. I think I really need to start cutting it a little bit further away from the vinyl. And you'll see here, I'm pretty sure I get a little bit of the backing on the vinyl there. I could be mistaken. I haven't looked at this for a while. And got it. So yeah, you can see on the right side there's that big piece of backing that I got on there. And I think that's just from cutting it too close to the backing, or cutting the backing too close to the vinyl, to the adhesive side. But what I ended up doing was I pulled the vinyl, instead of trying to pick that off, the adhesive, I just pulled the vinyl, shifted it down a little bit since I had a bunch of play. I had a lot of forgiveness since there was probably I don't know, 6 inches or so on either side of the cabinet. So you can't see this real well because I'm in the way, but I'm just using a little squeegee here just to lay the first part of it down. So if you remember in Arkanoid, or in the Arkanoid series, I decided to try using a rubber roller, basically the same roller I used to apply laminate to lay the vinyl down, the side art. And that worked actually really, really well in that instant. In that instance, it worked really well at getting the side art laid down. And I tried that here. In fact, I was going to use that same roller to do this whole thing, but I don't know what it was, if it was a polyurethane, if it was how I was using it. I couldn't get that to work hardly at all. I had trouble using it, and I tried it just very early on and ended up starting over and using the squeegee because I was getting air bubbles. It was not a very good adhesion. So I think under the right circumstances, it works really well, but in this case, it didn't. And that's kind of why I'm always experimenting. There's not just one proper way to do something, at least in this case for me. There's several. And so I decided to go back to using squeegee, and that seemed to work the best. It takes a little more effort, I think, and a little more time, but in this case, it was totally worth it. And you saw that I didn't spray anything down. I'm not using the wet method here. This is going on completely dry, and that's been another area of contention. You know, I've done side art, obviously using the wet method, where you spray the surface down, then you lay the artwork down, and then you spray the pre-mask and lift off, and it works well. But in this case, I opted to go with the dry method, just because I didn't want to do those extra steps. I didn't think I really needed to, because this is just the black vinyl, and I had everything pretty much laid out and prepped right. So you do risk screwing something up because you can't really redo it. But I was pretty confident in this case, and that the wet method can add a little extra time. So I just wanted to do something a little bit different. It's a long-winded way of saying I just wanted to try a different method. And here I've got a little pin. At the very bottom, there were just a couple of air bubbles that I wanted to attack and address right away. But that was about it. And I'm not exactly sure. I may have just introduced a little air and maybe rushed this a little bit, but there were I don't know, there were 3 or 4, and they all just went away. Just, you just use a little pin prick, and nothing too serious. So now that I got the bottom laid down, I can take these weights off, and then we can just lay the rest of this vinyl down now that we have everything, more or less started. So what I've got laying on the cabinet here is I took the tube that my side art came in, and basically, actually, I'm not sure if I think this is actually the tube that came from my Arkanoid side art. But regardless, what I did was I took some backing, the waxy backing, flipped it around so that the waxy side was facing outward, and wrapped the tube in that so that I could use that to separate the vinyl from, touching the cabinet. That way I could peel back a lot of the backing without risking it sticking to the cabinet when I didn't want it to, if that makes sense. So I'm just trying to figure out the right angle to get everything all started, and then I can just flip this around, and that way I don't have to worry about, someone holding it up or having another person, or, a spot, further down than where I'm applying it, getting stuck and, being in a real mess. And I think that worked out pretty well. That was an experiment, but I think it did work out pretty well. Like when I applied my full cabinet vinyl to Arkanoid, no, not Orkanoid, Marble Madness, I did need a second set of hands to help me with that because it, was the whole cabinet and I didn't want to risk the same thing. But I didn't have that luxury this time around, so I decided to improvise this contraption, and I think it worked out all right. So what I'm doing that you can't see under there is I'm just, inch by inch, I'm moving that tube back to allow a little bit of the adhesive to stick to the cabinet, and then I'm just going through with my squeegee, and then I'm just, slowly but surely just moving the tube back, then laying the vinyl down, then moving the tube back, and then laying the vinyl down. And it's not a very fast process, as you can see here. It's just a little bit at a time, and then a little bit more. And this, I bought a pack of these squeegees. They're, I think, can't remember if they're like automotive squeegees. Here I sped it up a bit, but you can buy a pack of them. They were pretty darn cheap. I don't know if they're like $10 or not, but they're really nice. It's a nice squeegee. I have a bunch of other ones, like regular like window squeegees, but these are really nice. They're made specifically to apply vinyl decals. And at the very tip is a piece of felt that's stuck to it. And that's really nice because you can use a little more force that way without ruining or worrying about ruining your artwork and scratching it, which I've done before. So yeah, just rinse and repeat slowly but surely. There I actually lifted the vinyl back up so that I could kind of redo it a little bit. If you're really careful, you can do that in certain areas. I don't really recommend it if you can avoid it, but because you do risk tearing things. But in this case, it worked out all right. And almost done, almost up to the top. But if you look real closely, and you'll see this in another part of the video, I miscalculated this vinyl a little bit, and the very like the midways up, you see where my scissor is, right off to the left. I didn't have enough vinyl to cover that little tiny corner there, and we'll fix that. But that was simply a little miscalculation. Here I'm going through, and I was just going through with my pin again just to fix any air bubbles, and there weren't that many. So here's that corner I was talking about. Now I'm just trying to figure out how to fix that spot. And since this black vinyl has that fine texture, it's really good at hiding blemishes, but it's also good at fixing things like this because you can kind of seam two pieces together and it's not very noticeable at all. In fact, now I don't even notice this. But this is how I went about doing it. I just grabbed another piece of vinyl and lined it up. I tried using the wet method here. You saw me spray it a little bit, but that really didn't work the best. I had to actually wipe most of it off because it was screwing up with the adhesion. And since it's such a small section, it wasn't sticking on very well. With a larger section, yeah, no problem. But on the edge like this with a little tiny piece, it just wasn't working very well with all that liquid. In fact, I think, yeah, I decided to scratch that, and that's okay. You learn, you live and learn. So this is kind of take two with it being a little more dry for better adhesion. I think that's on there pretty good now. Yeah, that looks good. I think I just leave it like this because I'm going to come through. Yeah, because I'm going to come through now and we're just going to trim all the excess off. So I've got my X-Acto knife here and just going around and trimming all the vinyl. I think I let this sit too for just a few minutes. I wanted to make sure that that corner had enough adhesion that I wasn't gonna pull it off when I came around. But you can see how much extra vinyl I had hanging off the edge. Again, I think on this side, it wasn't obviously centered perfectly, which is why we had that mistake at the front, but for the most part, the whole cabinet had a bunch of overhang. Here we come around the corner. This was a little bit hectic. I didn't want to tear that off, so I took a little extra time, but it turned out really nice. And I think that's almost it. Yeah, that'll do it. So now we have to apply vinyl to what's called the kick plate, or the front of the cabinet. And this is obviously a lot trickier than the sides, because we can't, at least in this case, you can't remove this, and it's not all by itself. We've got the control panel above it. Again, this would be so much easier if I could remove that control panel. But you improvise. So I've got the coin door off like we had in the first part of the video, and we should be all set to go here. What I ended up doing, well, I had to kind of do things a little bit differently. Some people will actually make an insert for the coin door, like a wood block or something that they can fill that hole with. That way, it makes it a little bit easier to apply vinyl because you don't have that hole in the center. But I usually don't do that. I haven't had any problems doing it this way. You just have to be really careful and mindful of where that hole is. But once you have the vinyl laid down in the areas that it's making contact with, then it's just fine. Then you're just cutting a little hole. It's just that part about being careful that you don't put too much pressure on that area. So I decided the way to go about doing this was to take the flat side. So like I cut the square out of the vinyl, and one side was a perfect right angle, perfect square, parallel. And so I decided to line it up with the control panel, and then the rest could just overhang. And that was pretty much my game plan. And then to try to tape it down as best I could, tape it down in place, just like we would with any other artwork. But I did spend a fair amount of time thinking about this, thinking about what's the best way to just get this started. And that's a lot of times the trickiest, part of this. And I'm not afraid to use a lot of tape. In fact, I think most of the time I use too much. But it's better to be safe than sorry. And this way that artwork won't move around, or the vinyl in this case won't move around, and I can make sure that everything's all square when I get it started. And actually, while I think about this, I believe my camera shut off for a good third of this. If I recall, I either ran out of battery or my memory card filled up, and I didn't realize that until later. Because I have to I try to glance over at my camera, but sometimes you just get too wrapped up in this and you don't notice things like that. So I apologize in advance. I think I get it started, and then you'll see suddenly it's all done. But I think you get the idea here. So, anyways, again, I apologize, but there is some footage missing from this. So I'm just cutting off a little bit of the excess, so it's a little easier to work with. Yeah, this was pretty tricky, but I don't think it's as tricky as when I did the kick plate on Arkanoid with the laminate, because that stuff you had to be so much more precise because it has to fit perfectly in that spot. Whereas this, you have a little extra play. It still has to be precise, but you have that overhang. You have a little room for forgiveness. And the kick plate as it was, it was very interesting. I was deciding whether or not to actually put vinyl over it because it had this I wouldn't call it a laminate. It was more like a melamine. So it was a hard surface, and there wasn't originally vinyl over that area, just on the sides of the cabinet. But I had all this extra vinyl, and ultimately I thought, well, it'll match the sides. It'll look pretty sharp. So I decided to lay it over there anyways. But I did go back and forth trying to decide if I should or just leave it the way it is. But I had to patch a few holes on the front. I had to do some really light sanding, and so it didn't look as pretty as before. So this really was the answer. And now I'm just cutting a little tiny notch so I can run one long piece of tape right down the center. I don't want this vinyl to fold over. Yeah, you can see the vinyl caving in a little bit over where the coin door was. Definitely got to be careful. I'm sure there's plenty of guys out that would say not to do it this way, but it works for me, and to each their own, I guess. There have been some times where I have tried to do it that way, but for one, I don't have something solid enough like a piece of wood, and I certainly don't have the tools to really cut something like that. I do have a router, but that's about it. I guess if I was feeling ambitious, I could try something. But if this is working, why go through the extra hassle, right? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start on, I guess it would be the furthest side from this angle. So the side opposite of me is where I want to start applying the vinyl. And once I have that down, then I'm pretty much all set. I can do the whole thing. But it's always that beginning that's the trickiest, I find. So now the moment of truth. Again, it's, how should I get this started? So here's that tube again. I decided to use real briefly just to protect it, but I'm not sure if I don't think I used it for very long. I just didn't want the edge sticking to the cabinet because I'm starting it's kind of screwy. It's almost the inverse of how I normally do these things. And in most cases what I do is I start from the center and work my way out. But in this case I wanted to start from the outside, if that makes any sense. And you know, the video should explain it a little bit better than I am, or trying to explain it. So I needed to peel off enough of the vinyl so that I could get my squeegee into get it applied in the corner. And here I decided that I needed more tape. There was just too much play. So I'm just adding a little bit more. I think I ran out of that heavy duty blue masking tape. And so I've got a little bit of this, I think they call it like frog tape. It's another masking tape, not as wide. Yeah, and then I throw a couple weights. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that this artwork does not move. Yeah, so I'm peeling off quite a bit of the backing, more than I normally would, just because I need it. I need more of that adhesive to be exposed. So here again, I can't remember if I got any of the backing stuck to the adhesive, but I need to I need to cut it a little bit further away. There I'm getting really close. And I did a pretty good job. There are a couple little tiny specks, but I don't think they're going to pose a problem. So now I'm starting just a little bit close to the inside edge. And this is the trickiest part, I think, because once I have this, I'm pretty much home free. But for now, it's pretty darn nerve-wracking. Because not only do I have to square it up to where the control panel is there, but then you also have to square it, to the inner edge of the cabinet. And that was probably the most challenging part. How do you keep it at a perfect square inside there? I think the area under the control panel was my biggest concern. I wanted that to be flush because if that was off by like a degree, it's just not going to look right at all because there will be a piece of vinyl missing, and that would be really difficult to fix. Not like that corner edge on the side of the cabinet because we're dealing with a much more confined area, much more precise. So we're looking pretty good here. Almost done. And because the squeegee has that velvet, I can put a lot of pressure on it. There I'm kind of redoing my work a little bit. Again, you can do that if you're careful, but it is it is pretty dangerous in terms of damaging or screwing something up. But yeah, I can use a lot of pressure with the squeegee to run along the inside edge. I think we're just about done here. I guess there is a little bit more. But yeah, I was really glad that I did this vinyl. It looks really sharp. You'll see once it's done, but I think it turned out really nice. Still working along that inner edge. Yep, there we're doing a little spot again too. Had a little air bubble. Probably because I'm running it right up to the edge. And there we are. And again, I'm applying this using what they call the dry method, which just means the vinyl goes directly onto the surface. There's no liquid is used. All right, so now we can move around to the other side and continue. Using the tube again, although I don't think I really needed to. It's just kind of a safety precaution. You could see there are a little bit of fragments of the backing, but it wasn't that bad. And here you can see I skipped way ahead. That's that's where I lost some of that footage. But you get the idea. You've seen me apply the one side, and now I'm just trimming it up. I already cut out the hole, getting the edges all done. And yeah, that turned out really sharp. Yeah, really glad I did that. I just want to make sure that all the edges are perfect. So now we're just going to replace these leg levelers. These were really rusted, really old. I don't think they've ever been replaced. In fact, I had to, and this isn't recorded, but I did have to replace the actual threaded holes that these leg levelers screw into. And those plates, they're square plates. They're larger than the hole, and then they have the threaded hole for the leg leveler. And you install those. In this case, they were installed on the inside of the cabinet. I think you can do it either way, but I think you're supposed to do it on the inside of the cabinet. This is the first time that I had to replace the plates and not just the leg levelers themselves. So here, right now, I'm counting the threads to where I have the nut, because since this cabinet is so short and it's awkward for me to play it with a gun because I'm kind of squatting. It looks kind of ridiculous. I decided that I'd get some really tall leg levelers, and since I replaced the plates and the cabinet was strong, I wanted to hike it up quite a bit. So I have these leg levelers set pretty much at their maximum height without risking, damaging the leg levelers or the cabinet. So these go in, I don't know, 7 or 8 turns, I suppose. But yeah, they're up pretty darn high. But it works. It fixed the job. It's a little more comfortable to play this game now. Just double checking my work. Of course, when you put this game up, right, you've got 4 leg levelers, but and that's assuming that the cabinet is completely level on its own. So chances are you're going to have to make some adjustments once the cabinet's upright. And I did have to make some minor adjustments, but for the most part, it was okay. Plus, on top of that, I like to throw all my games on carpet sliders. And so if they're not perfectly square, you're talking about a piece of cushion, basically. So if things aren't perfectly square, and they almost never are, you have to make a few extra twists and adjustments with these leg levelers, usually once the cabinet's upright. So I usually come in with like a leveler and make sure I've got things as close to level as they can get. And that plate at the bottom, I did have, was at a little bit of an angle, so I was just correcting that. Make sure that all of these are kind of sticking out straight. All right. So now we're just going to throw the T-molding on. You've seen me do this before. It's nothing too exciting, so I sped everything up. I'm just putting a couple finishing nails in on the bottom there to ensure that the T-molding stays in place, and then we just wrap it around the cabinet. The backside was pretty easy. It didn't really require much in terms of cutting the barb, cutting little notches in it around the sharp corners like you do around the front. And I went with this. It's like a textured, like almost like a leather black T-molding. Originally, this cabinet, at least when I got it, had a smooth, like a flat black. But I thought the leathery texture would just, complement the rest of the game. You got a textured vinyl. It's a Western theme. A leathery texture just seemed appropriate. So that's what I decided to go with. And the other side. Again, a couple finishing nails. Um, that's what my girlfriend does. Excuse me. That's what my girlfriend does with her tea molding. She likes to throw a couple finishing nails in the bottom. And I do have a nail gun and a stapler, but I find those finishing nails to work just fine. And now we're around the back, almost done. Using a rubber mallet here that everyone will recommend to you if you've never done team molding before, because you won't damage anything that way. And almost done. Cut the end off. Couple finishing nails and done. So the next nerve-wracking part. This is worse than any of the vinyl, because I basically really do only have one chance at this. And this, once again, this control panel does not remove. It does not come off the cabinet, not without some serious force and possible damage to the cabinet. So I spent a long time trying to think of what's the best way to apply this. How am I going to do this? And this is what I came up with. There's just no way to really avoid applying it while the control panel is on the cabinet. So the one mistake I would say I made here, and you'll see, even though this is sped up, you'll see it, is I did not remove enough backing from the control panel to get this started. You know, I'm only doing a couple inches here, which I thought would be just fine. But you'll see once I get it applied here, and it goes on just fine. But now, since the control panel is mounted to the cabinet permanently, I have to lift this up, and I can't get a good angle at this backing. I try rolling it, I try throwing it in the back of the cabinet, and it's just not having it. And in that process, trying to remove this backing becomes a complete nightmare because I don't have a clear shot at it. And so you'll see, I just kind of destroy this backing, and it turns into a jaggedy nightmare. So in hindsight, I should have taken probably a good 6 inches off. But yeah, now you can see how shredded that backing is. And I'm not kidding. I probably spent half an hour trying to get that to that point. But finally, I have it right, and I can start applying this again. And then the rest of it does come off a little bit easier. Had to use my X-Acto knife to kind of get it started, but yeah, it's just a nightmare. Now I have a better edge. And then from there on out, it goes on relatively easy. I love this polyurethane surface, though. The adhesive just likes it. It just sticks right to it. And this artwork is just beautiful. Again, I got all the artwork from This Old Game, thisoldgame.com. Rich did a phenomenal job on this. And I ended up finding a dedicated bezel for this game, an original one. And I ended up sending that out to Rich to have him reproduce it. So he scanned it, color matched it, and it turned out really sharp because that hasn't been reproed before. No one's reproduced that bezel. So I was very lucky to have someone reach out to me on Clav and sell me an original for a good price. And now reproductions are readily available. So appreciate that. And Rich did a tremendous job. So we've almost got this applied. Again, I have to be careful of where the gun mounts because that's just an empty hole, just like the coin door on the front of the cabinet. So I'm being pretty light around that area. And then what's different, well, not different, but since I can't remove this control panel, applying this front side was a little nerve-wracking because it's a vertical angle. And you don't want to screw that up. So what's the best way to really apply that? And there's just no easy way around it. So I was just starting from the top while holding the artwork out as best I could. And it worked. It just wasn't a very smooth process. And I wish I had decided to move the camera here, but I wanted to get this done in one shot. Otherwise, I would have shown you the front angle of putting this artwork down. But I don't have two cameras, and you know, when you're in the middle of this, you can't really stop. At least it's not very easy to. But you can trust that the artwork's going on nicely, and you'll see it later. Basically, after this, I believe we just have the side art, and then mostly the artwork in general is done before we put the cabinet back together. And I can't wait for you to see the side art. The side art on this game is just beautiful. Making some last minute adjustments using that squeegee to make sure that the artwork is completely flush and adhered to the polyurethane surface. One interesting thing about this control panel overlay is that when I removed the old one, you could actually see remains like almost like if someone had drawn in ink, like that instruction panel and some of the canyons on the wood. It was almost as if someone had just traced it. And so I thought that was pretty interesting that you could actually see where the artwork was before, especially that instruction spot, instruction decal, or well, it's not a decal, but that little instruction square. Just going over the artwork one last time just to make sure, it's completely on there. There's no air bubbles or spots that I missed. But it's on there good now. That thing's not coming off. And then on the underside of that front panel, there's a little lip, and I'm just making sure that that artwork or that section is also stuck to the cabinet. We don't want that peeling off. And that's what I'm doing here. Just feeling my way underneath that lip. So now that that's all done, we can cut out our gun mounting hole here. Just using an X-Acto knife again. And this isn't science by any means because this hole was kind of chewed up. So it wasn't like a perfect cylinder by any means. And really the only thing we need to worry or concern ourselves with is the 4 bolt holes that the gun mount attaches to. And there just has to be enough of a hole to get the wiring through, which isn't much. So I wasn't too concerned about getting this absolutely precise. And you're not going to see this anyways once that mounting plate gets thrown on there because it's larger than this hole. Yeah, you can kind of see how it's a little bit chewed up. It's not a perfect hole by any means. Not a perfect circle anyways. This one side was kind of problematic. There's like a notch in the wood. And now we have Pac-Man. There we go. it was really being stubborn, and I'm trying to figure out what is causing my blade to get hung up, and it was just the unevenness of that hole of that wood. Makes me wonder if someone had, reworked it at some point. Voila. Now we got to also cut out those 4 bolt holes as well as the button, the start button. But I don't think I got that on camera. I think I realized after the camera was off that I'd forgotten to cut out that start button hole. But just trust that I did. Again, nothing too exciting with that. Okay, I guess I stopped there. So now we get to do the side art. This time I decided to do it a little bit differently. Again, I'm always looking for what works best and kind of experimenting around. And there are so many different ways you can do this stuff. This time around, I had heard that sometimes it's easiest just to do the cabinet or do the side art with the cabinet upright, especially if it's not a full, wrap, and let gravity do the job. So you start at the top and then you just kind of let gravity pull the artwork down as you're applying it top to bottom. So that's what I did here. And I apologize for the light here. The lighting really made this artwork tough to see on camera. It kind of blows it out unless I'm standing in front of it and blocking some of the daylight. But I decided to do it this way, and I am doing the wet method here. So you're getting a taste of a little bit of everything. I do have this sped up, but the premise is you spray the surface and then you apply the adhesive. And the nice thing about what the liquid does is it prevents it helps with air bubbles, but it also allows you to fix a mistake. Since it's on a wet surface, you can move the artwork without worrying about tearing it or screwing something up. And here I'm using one of those other squeegees. Well, now I'm using the same one, the blue one. But you saw I had a big, like a window squeegee. And I like to use that if I can because it covers a lot more of the surface. So now I sprayed the front of the pre-mask and we're just pulling it off here. And that artwork looks super sharp. I love this artwork. I think they could have done a full cabinet wrap, but here's the other side. I skipped the preliminary steps. Didn't think you needed to see that again, but I just wanted to see I wanted you to see the other side as it's being revealed. Wiping off the excess liquid. Yeah, super sharp. So now we get the fun process of putting this coin door back together. And I mean that in about the most sarcastic way possible, because I absolutely hate this. It's tedious. You got all these little tiny parts, and that's why I'm speeding this up, because it takes a long time to get everything all lined up perfectly. So you've got the plates for the coin slots and everything that goes along with that. You got springs, coin reject buttons, all of that jazz. And I usually end up this is one thing that I almost always take pictures of, regardless of how many times I've done it, because every coin door is a little bit different and I always forget, which way something's oriented. So yeah, again, using a cell phone or a camera really pays off in this situation. These are the reject, what would you call them? Reject slots, where the quarters will be ejected if they're rejected. I had all of the metal parts powder coated for this thing at my local shop. They always do a great job, and I went with smooth black. I've got a guy that's pretty darn local to me, just a few miles away, runs a pretty nice shop, and their turnaround's always fast. In fact, if you find someone that's good and a good price, you latch on to them, make a good relationship because they'll treat you right. At least in my case, in my experience. All right, so I just realized there that the coin bucket, or the box that holds the coin bucket, needed to be installed from the back. And now we're just wiring up the coin door. I'm looking at pictures on my phone, making sure I got the wires correct, everything all lined up properly. Got the lights all set up. And now we're just going to throw a couple of locks on here. And this is one of those things that, again, I wish I had known better when I got into this hobby. Oh, actually, I scratch that. We're not putting the locks on. Right now, we're putting the Exidy sticker on that I got from GameStencils.com. I believe Proc is the one that makes these. Because the original games had this Exidy logo on the coin door, and I think it looks really sharp. So anyways, getting back to the locks, all three of these locks that I put on this game are keyed the same. I made sure that they're all the same. That way you just need one key for the game. And I wish I had knowledge of that or known better when I got into this hobby, because this is the only game that all of the locks are the same. And and all of my games, every one of them, I kid you not, I think maybe like 15 or 16 games. All of them have a different key or keys. You know, if they have a coin door, then they have a back door as well. You've got 2 keys for that game at least. So I have a pile of keys, and I have to label them, make sure that I know what game they go to. So I have this drawer. I have literally a drawer under my Mega Touch that's just basically just keys to my games. So, you know, if I was feeling super ambitious, maybe I would replace all of them with the same keyed lock, but I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm too lazy. I've got too many other projects. But had I known about that or decided to do that early on, I would have saved that hassle. So here we threw the grill on, the speaker grill here. And by the way, that the right speaker is an addition. So long story short, some of these cabinets came with 1 speaker, some came with 2. And there's more details online, but I believe that the taller cabinets, since these came in 2 different style cabinets, the taller games, the ones in the taller cabinets, had 2 speakers. But all of these boards, the hardware and the game itself, supported 2 speakers, kind of a pseudo stereo. That I think they call it an amplified mono, but it's a pseudo stereo. Anyways, I'm just going to keep talking about those speakers real quick, but the piece of wood that the left speaker mounts to, on the right side, there were holes for another speaker. There just wasn't the actual speaker hole itself, you know, for the speaker part, but there were the 4 carriage bolt holes. So I took my router and I made another hole, wired in another speaker, and the game just sounds way better than if there was just the left speaker. There is kind of a pseudo stereo effect, and it sounds great. I like having, you know, equal, you know, an even amount of audio on both sides of the cabinet. Otherwise, it's just on the left. So as you can see here, I've got the start button in. I've got our gun mounting plate in, and now we're gonna install this gun. This isn't the same one that you saw, but if you remember, I was talking about how originally these games came with a beautiful wood stock gun that they later on stopped using because they would break from all the abuse in the arcades. Well, I have I'm very lucky. I have a wonderful girlfriend, and she went out of her way to locate one of these original Woodstock Exidy guns for this game, and picked one up from a fellow collector. And let me just tell you, these are not cheap. Again, I'm super lucky, but man, this gun is beautiful, and it just completes that Western theme. That black synthetic stock gun to me just looks absolutely ugly. So I've actually toyed with the notion. I've toyed with the idea. I don't know if I'm going to do this yet or not. So if anyone's watching, chime in. But I've considered reaching out to some gun shops that manufacture stocks and see if they'd be willing to reproduce this wood stock. It doesn't have to be the whole gun, just the stock itself, because all the other parts are the same. So I've thought about seeing what the cost would be and then offering that up, just like I offer up these pivot pins on klov.com on their forums. So I don't know how much of an interest there would be in something like that, but and I'm not sure what the cost would be, but I've thought about doing that since these are really difficult to find. But anyways, so I've got everything that you saw here kind of fits together. There's a pivot mount, that round little ball that fits around the gun base, and then that pivot pin goes through everything. And so here I've got it mounted, and I'm just making sure that it's got enough freedom of movement. You have to put I didn't show this in the video, but you do have to put some sort of lubricating grease on there on all the metal parts, and they recommend I think it's a white lithium grease, and that's what I ended up using. So now I'm just connecting the wiring. It's just that one Molex plug. And now this is the brand new Repro bezel. You can see how the artwork is just beautiful. It matches everything else. And again, Rich at This Old Game reproduced these from an original bezel that I sent him. And he did a phenomenal job. This just completes the look. And then here's my marquee. And I actually I ended up with 3 marquees. The original that came with it, another original, well, actually, and then 2 more originals. And this is the one that looked the absolute best. It wasn't faded at all. I thought the purple on the Cheyenne title looked the best. So that's the one I went with. I gave one to my girlfriend to hang up in our garage, and then the other one I kept. So now I'm just booting up the game, making sure everything works. I want to give the gun a shot. That's what I'm most concerned with, but I can also test and make sure everything else is right. And before booting this game up, I had tested to make sure that the game turned on, but I hadn't tested the gun yet. So here I'm just kind of shooting around. Now, I had calibrated the gun before this, but I hadn't calibrated this one. But I think since the insides are basically the same, this one seemed pretty spot on. I think I did recalibrate this one after I was done recording this video. And you do that inside the game. There's a crosshair that you shoot at that's supposed to be dead center. And there's iron sights actually on the gun, just like a real rifle. So you line those up with the crosshairs, you shoot, and when you're satisfied, you basically save the data, and it calibrates based on that. So here I'm just playing a quick round just to kind of get a feel for how the gun's working. And it seems to be working just fine. But yeah, what a touch. I mean, that really completes the game. So thanks, Carrie. It was a really generous Christmas gift. And whenever I decide to end this round here, we can get on with the end of the video. And maybe I'll do a gameplay of this. I haven't decided yet. It's going to be tough because I'll have to find the right angle to point the camera at. All right, so that's it. And here's the cabinet all complete. And I got to tell you, like some of the other ones, all the other videos, I think this is quite possibly my best restore, if not one of the best. And you can see, the before picture I threw up there. But man, this thing turned out sharp. I love the wood grain gun, or the woodstock gun. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. Everything about it I love. I love the theme of this game. I like the Western theme. Now, if I do a gameplay video, you'll see this is not a very PC game. This is an early 80s, so a lot of things about it aren't very PC, but I really do like this theme, and this artwork is phenomenal. Rich did a tremendous job on this. Absolutely outstanding. But yeah, just a lot of fun. I love this theme. And the game has, when I do a gameplay video, I think I'm going to, you'll hear the sounds of it. But yeah, I mean, even the little touches like the Exidy sticker on the coin door, and there you get a better shot of the front artwork of the front of the control panel overlay. It's a cool game. It's definitely the first game of its kind I have in my collection. So there you have it. So just want to say thanks for subscribing. Hope you enjoyed these videos. Yeah, post a comment if you do, and I'll see you in the next video. All right. Thanks, guys. Stay tuned.